Greetings, everyone. My name is Jalisa Goodwin. I am an African descended historian, writer, scholar, and activist. And as such, I take a great interest in and hold an immense stake in the advancement of people of African descent. Also, as a proud member of Ubiquity Incorporated, I have pledged myself to the strengthening of the bonds between African American men and women. And so, as such, as a member of the organization, we hold the principles of the Nguzo Saba near and dear to our heart, and the Nguzo Saba are the seven principles of Kwanzaa. So when each year when the holiday comes around, I find myself very excited to engage in any types of celebrations or ceremonies that seek to uphold these principles and to educate people on the importance of these principles to us as people of African descent. And I was speaking to many of my friends and family members, and in light of all of the situations that have been happening recently with the murder of countless men and women of African descent and the continued the continued oppression of our people, I think that it's imperative and beneficial that we draw on these principles of Kwanzaa in order to heal ourselves and to find ways to move forward, and to strengthen ourselves. So, just to give you a little bit of background information on Kwanzaa, if you're not familiar with the holiday, I'm going to read a short excerpt from a book called African American Holidays, which is written by James C. Anike. All right. Kwanzaa was founded in San Diego, California by cultural nationalist Ron Karenga and was first observed in 1966. It is considered one of the most important holidays for African Americans because the observance transcends religious, ideological, regional, and class boundaries. This celebration combines elements of our African culture and African American experience to provide a framework for instilling strong values. What's more, Kwanzaa clearly represents the three dimensions important to African culture and history. The first dimension is the past, represented by the spirits of our ancestors and their collective experiences. The second dimension is the present, which is represented by our consistency in maintaining our culture and our commitment to uplift our race. And the third dimension is the future, represented by the children that are not yet born, the children that we hope and pray will experience real freedom in their lifetime. So I think that the most important aspect of that for me is that it outside of just being a holiday, which is considered by definition a day to observe or a day of leisure, a day to celebrate and to commune with people that you care about. Outside of just being considered a holiday, Kwanzaa is it's a form of unification that ties together the past, the present, and the future. So in that context, Kwanzaa is much more than a holiday and much more than a celebration. And like I said, in terms of the liberation struggle, it is a tool that can be used constantly throughout the year by people of African descent to empower us, to motivate us, to strengthen us all, and to help us to come together and develop a better understanding of ourselves and how we can unify to better advance our communities and our families and ultimately our race. So, within that context, I want to talk about the first two principles of Kwanzaa, which are Umoja and Kujichagulia. Okay, so the first principle of Kwanzaa, which is celebrated on December 26th, which was yesterday, the day before, depending on how you look at it, because it's about 11:51 right now. So the second day of Kwanzaa is almost over. So yeah, this is Umoja, which is the first principle of Kwanzaa, and just to read a small excerpt on how that manifests. Umoja, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. Okay, so that one seems simple enough because Umoja is unity. So we view that in coming together with our families, our communities, our people, coming together as a people to uplift each other and to strengthen each other. But so I've viewed it in that context in recent years, but just in reflecting on that principle this year, especially, and just in my own personal growth and development, I see the importance of unity within yourself before you can, not necessarily before, but unity within yourself as we seek to unify with our families and our communities. And so, in thinking about that, I've been reading a book called The Community of Self by Dr. Naeem Akbar. If you don't have a hard copy of the book, you can find the audiobook on YouTube. So if you just go to youtube.com and put in The Community of Self, then the complete audiobook is there in pieces or broken up into chapters, each video. So I read the book earlier this year, but as Kwanzaa was coming around and I was looking for a way to affirm the principle of Umoja for myself and to really reflect on how it's manifested in my life throughout the year and how I want to apply it to my life moving forward and embarking on a new year, I began to really take stock of the words that were written in the book. So we're going to talk about the community of self, and the community of self is basically yourself and the community that resides within your individual body. So this is just an excerpt from the book. The self is a kind of community. It has within it the specialists which one finds within any community. These specialists perform certain important functions for the benefit of the whole community. The road to inner peace is the same road to outer peace. Such peace is acquired by harmonious cooperation of these members under a leadership for the common good. So basically the book is saying that within yourself, you have a community of specialists who work together for the greater good of self-advancement. And so this is a copy of a visual from the book. It's not, as clearly defined, but it will do. So these are the specialists that reside within the community of self, those being the drives, the senses, the ego, the memory, reason, conscience, and the will. The will is shaded in and at the top because the will is the ultimate ruler or intended ruler of the self, but we're going to go over each and talk about how those can work together in order to promote unity within yourself. Okay, so we're going to look at the first community of self, which is the drives. So the drives are your instincts or the movers of yourself. They're the mental speakers for the physical body and its needs. So your drives are an example of your drives would be movement towards what gives pleasure and movement away from what causes pain. So your drives are what motivates you to do certain things or motivate you to abstain from doing certain things. And then the second member of the community of self are the senses. The senses. So the senses are the body's windows or channels through which the self receives messages from the outer world. And so that is what we use to inform ourselves and to help us to navigate through certain environments through taste and touch and smell and hearing and things like that. So the third member of the community of self is the ego. And the ego is the part of self that speaks up for the rights of the individual and specializes in making sure the individual needs of the person's self are not being violated. So your ego is that part of yourself that kind of recognizes shade and addresses it. That part that says like, is this person, trying to offend me, or am I in danger? Am I in harm? It's the part of you that says, no, I don't think that's right for me, and I'm not going to stand for it. Then you have the memory. And the memory is like the library or the archives of a mighty city, or the self. It's the light that shines on previous lessons and help us to rise above previous mistakes. So the memory is that part of yourself that says, I recall this happening and it wasn't beneficial to me in the past, so I'm not going to do that again. Or the last time I did this, this is what happened. So we use our memory to kind of guide us going into the future. And the reason, figure out. The reason, which brings order and organization to the information brought in by the senses, and it helps to interpret experiences and manage our environment. So the reason is that part of the community that seeks to categorize everything, to say, well, this happened and then this happened, the cause and effect, or this is the reason for this, and this is the reason why this happened. So the reason is the way that we rationalize the things that are happening in the environment around us. The conscience, which is also defined by the Holy Quran as the self-accusing spirit. It is the part of the community that introduces a value of good or bad, right or wrong, to the senses' observation of the environment around them. It's basically your moral sense. Your conscience is the part of you that says, I don't think that's right, or oh, that wasn't nice. So That's a very important member of the community also. And then the last one, which we spoke about, is the will, which is the part of the community or the unique feature that distinguishes human from all other parts of creation. It is our power to create. Our power to create lies in our will and its ability to aspire beyond what is immediately available. So the will is that thing that motivates you, that keeps you going, that thing that says, I'm not where I want to be, but this is how I can get there. And if I continue along this path, this will get me there. So your will is what keeps you going. It's your willpower to advance yourself and to succeed. So when we talk about unifying these members of the community, just like with any external community, there has to be a hierarchy, or there has to be a sense of leadership. And so you have all of these different things going on within your community of self, and they have to be in perfect balance in order for you to operate at your optimal level. And so we want to talk about the different drawbacks of allowing each of these things to rule over your community. Okay. So if the drives, which we talked about, the thing that gets you away from bad and towards good, if the drives are permitted to rule over the self, then the person becomes only a physical pleasure seeker, because then your only motivation is pleasure. So you will abandon reason and your senses and things that tell you morally that this isn't right or this isn't good for you, because it's something that gives you pleasure. And so that will overshadow everything. With your senses, if the community relies on the senses as the ruler of self, then the self will suffer, because the senses only provide surface information about the environment and is only equipped to guide by impression. So that makes it an ineffective judgment of the world, because if we are basing our understanding of everything that's happening around us on just our senses, well, that smells good and that looks good and that sounds good, then we will abandon reason and memory and the other members of the community. When it comes to the ego, if it seizes control of the community, the entire self is forced to work for the individual needs only. So like I said before, the ego is that part of yourself that makes sure that you're not being violated. But if the ego is overdeveloped, then you will prioritize your personal gain over everything else, and it's basically all for self. It's like, well, I understand that this is good for everybody else, but I'm going to do what I want to do because that's what feels good for me. So the ego is not the clear ruler of the community. The memory. If the memory controls the community, the self ceases to grow and lives in the chamber of the past. So it's kind of like, you maybe you have that person who did something to you as a kid, maybe pulled your hair or pushed you down, and so 20 years later you're still harboring that same feeling towards that person. Like, no, because I remember 20 years ago when you put gum in my hair. So you hear the saying all the time, like, stop living in the past. If we live in the past, then we will have no understanding of the present and how to move forward in the future. So it's good to rely on your memory, but not to rely on it primarily as the ruler of your community. Then we have reason. If reason tries to rule the community, the self becomes like a machine attempting to classify and qualify every aspect of life. So with that, it's like the saying, if it don't make dollars, then it don't make sense. So it's kind of like, if you cannot qualify or give a quantitative value to something, then you see no reason for it. You see no purpose in it. And that's a very rigid way of operating within the community or within the communal context, because there are some things that defy reason, or there are some things that we have to go outside of our understanding of reason in order to process. So the reasoning cannot be the ruler of the community. And then the conscience, or the self-accusing spirit. If allowed to dominate, the overdeveloped conscience can demand nothing short of perfection and lead to a constant state of dissatisfaction within the self community. So our conscience is good because it kind of checks you. It keeps you from going overboard. It kind of balances out the ego. But just like the ego can make it all about self, the conscience can make it all about sacrifice. And both represent an imbalance within the community of self. So if you allow your conscience to rule over you, then you will constantly be downing yourself and feeling bad for the things that you can't do or didn't do or were unable to do. So you don't want your conscience to rule over your community of self, because it's detrimental. Now with the will, when the will achieves rulership over the self, it achieves organization and harmonization of all components of the self and unites those separate forces for the good of the whole self community. So the willpower is the intended ruler over the self, which is why on the graphic it is shaded in. It is a component and a member of the community just like everyone else, but the will is the leader of the community. It is the part of yourself that you use to bring all of those things together for the greater good of yourself. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about these components of the community of self is because everything starts with self. Whether it's self-love, self-appreciation, motivation, anything, you can go about trying to encourage people, motivate people, heal people, educate people. Anything that you try to do in reference to other people, you first have to do for you and with yourself. So, in order for us to have unity within our communities and within our families, we have to have unity within ourselves. And so, just to quote again the community of self, once the self has achieved proper rulership within itself, it has come into proper and harmonious organization as well. The establishment of inner organization is the foundation for establishing an outer community of harmony and organization for the entire world. And so, yes, I feel like I've been working diligently to organize my community of self, and I want to see other people working to organize their community of self so that we can come together as a global community and work towards the advancement of our communities, our families, and ourselves. So that is why I brought that up. And now, since we are on the second day of Kwanzaa, or Kujichagulia, which is self-determination, I thought that it would be good to tie the two together in a way. So, find my book. I have all my materials spread out. Okay. Kujichagulia. That's my favorite one just because it has so many letters in it. So, Kujichagulia, self-determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves instead of being defined, named, created for, and spoken for by others. So, define, name, create, and speak. This principle is of the utmost importance because how many times have you had someone or something speak on your behalf or speak in place of you without really consulting you on how you feel and what you need? I believe on a greater sense, it's done continuously, daily. We see it in the media. If you look at the movie Exodus, you have people who do not look like us making representations of us that are inaccurate. So that is why it is highly important that we take the responsibility of naming, defining, and speaking for ourselves. And so in order to do that, we have to have knowledge of ourselves. And so there was a part of the community of self that goes from talking about the organization of the community to the topic of knowledge of self. And so it resonated for me. And it said, knowing ourselves is a fundamental aspect of assuming personal power and effectiveness. Power is merely a byproduct of knowing who you are and working in your self-interest. So in order for us to define ourselves, name ourselves, and to speak for ourselves, we have to have a knowledge of ourselves. We have to have an understanding of who we are, where we come from, where we are, and where we're headed. So again, it ties in the past, the present, and the future in that sense. So you go from unifying everything within yourself, educating yourself about yourself, knowing yourself, and seeking to define and create for and build for yourself. And by self, I don't just mean your individual self, but yourself as in yourself, your people, your community, your family, you as a representation of the whole. So behind me, I have this is an example of a Kujichagulia exercise that we did at a program that my organization put on for our campus community. And at the top it says Black woman, and it has definitions of what the Black woman is. And so here we have solar, queen, beauty, love, wife, bold, nurturer, fluid, nucleus, powerful, leader, honor, God, intelligence, maintainer, support, everlasting. So these are just definitions of what a Black woman is. And conversely, we had some of the brothers in the room do one for Black men. And we have a strong royal descendant who is a protector and a provider, a king, strength, intelligence, melanated male of adult demeanor, provider, regal, lover, wisdom, gentle, producer. So the main takeaway is that all of these definitions are self definitions. These were definitions that we came up with for ourselves. This is what we as black men and black women, this is how we see ourselves, and this is how we want the world to see us. And so how we see ourselves influences how the world sees us, and influences the effect that we have on how our children see us and how they perceive us and how they see themselves. So all of these things tie together. All the principles of Kwanzaa, though they are celebrated and acknowledged on separate days, they all tie together. So it's literally from unity to faith, or unity through faith. Those 7 principles coming together to collectively work to advance people of African descent into the future. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys, and to spend some time talking about those principles and how they resonate for me. And I hope that this has been an enjoyable discussion or lecture, whatever you want to call it, for you. And I hope that we can share this space again. The upcoming principle, or the principle for today, because it's now 12:09, is Ujima, which is collective work and responsibility. So in the next video, I'm going to attempt to tie in self-determination and collective work and responsibility, and how those two connect to each other. So I hope that you will share in that experience with me. Peace.